Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Omar Khalid. But today is Thursday, the 7th of July 2022, and these are the stories that we'll be talking about during the course of the show. We'll begin, ladies and gentlemen, with Sri Lanka and the economic situation that it is embroiled in. A lot of people are now cooking with firewood as the economy is burning. There's no gas available, no petrol available, although there are countries that are helping like China and India. Sri Lanka, nevertheless, the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka says that he can turn around Sri Lanka's economy in a couple of months to a year's time, but it will require a lot of effort. This said, the people are in turmoil. The worst economic crisis that Sri Lanka has seen since 1948, the year it got its independence. This is going to be our leading story of the day. Our second story of the day, ladies and gentlemen, concerns Boris Johnson, who is to stand down as the Conservative Party leader after having lost the support of his ministers and the MPs. As we very well know, there have been a spate of resignations starting from Tuesday and then Wednesday. On Wednesday, there were around 28 resignations that were given to the government. Now, a Conservative leadership contest is going to take place this summer. New Prime Minister will be in place in time for the party conference in October. In the meantime, Mr. Johnson will remain as Prime Minister. This is going to be our second story. Sri Lanka, the economic crisis that it is embroiled in, which has led to people returning to cooking with firewood. This and all the other crises with petrol, with gas, with medicine, with food, and many others. More in the following report.
Sri Lanka is bankrupt, and the acute pain of its unprecedented economic crisis will linger until at least the end of next year, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe told Parliament. The island nation's 22 million people have endured months of galloping inflation and lengthy power cuts after the government ran out of foreign currency to import vital goods. The once prosperous country will go into deep recession this year, and acute shortages of food, fuel, and medicine will continue. The IMF last week said more work is needed to set the nation's finances right and repair its runaway fiscal deficit before a deal could be struck on a funding arrangement to address its balance of payment crisis. Sri Lanka is almost entirely without petrol, and the government has shut down non-essential public services in an effort to conserve fuel. Sri Lankans are returning to cooking with firewood as gas is either unavailable or too expensive for most. Sri Lanka owes about $800 million to 7 fuel suppliers, according to an Associated Press report. Shortage of foreign exchange due to years of economic mismanagement and the impact of COVID-19, Sri Lanka has been struggling to import essentials, leading to severe shortages of medicine, food, and fuel.
Dr. Qais, Aslam, leading economist, joins us online. Dr. Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. Dr. Saab, Sri Lanka, every single day we see new issues that concern the people of Sri Lanka, and now the latest being that there's not enough petrol, there's not enough gas, despite the fact that there are certain countries that are helping it, whether it be Russia, whether it be China, whether it be India. Why is all of this happening, and is the IMF coming in to save the day, or will it be too late?
Number one, why is it happening? Look, Sri Lanka mostly has depended to earn dollars on tourism, and therefore, when due to COVID-19 and recession in the world, the tourist industry did not flourish. They had this problem. The other problem, I think, was a loan from China, which had its own problems. The thing is that whether it's Sri Lanka or whether it's other countries like Pakistan, we have not been able to make our natural resources productive, especially our labor force. And therefore, Sri Lanka depends on imports of energy sources. And energy sources have gone expensive due to this Ukraine war. Therefore, Sri Lankan had a debt crisis, and in my opinion, the corruption of the upper classes, especially the people who are in the government, brothers who are in the government, is very important. It is to note, and most of countries like ours have this problem, this siphoning out of the money from the government into certain hands. The people of Sri Lanka now are dependent, especially on the cities, are dependent on that foreign oil which is not there, are dependent on jobs which are not there. So the crisis is acute. Uh,
You
the
know, Dr. Saab, you
I
talk about the crisis. You talk about the crisis being acute. Let me just cite some figures. The Sri Lanka Central Bank has hiked interest rates to a 21-year high. Their inflation has hit a record 54.6%. Food inflation has galloped to 80.1%. Sri Lanka's president has even asked Russia's Vladimir Putin to help with the fuel import. This said, there are a lot of people in the civil society who are not happy with Ranil Wickremesinghe as the new prime minister. They say since the 2 months that he has gained power, he has not done enough. Whereas on the other hand, the prime minister says that he can turn around the economy within a year's time. What will happen? Will Sri Lanka rebound in a year's time, or will a political crisis further deepen its crisis?
I personally don't think Sri Lanka can rebound if it does not either uh, uh, make its tourist industry viable again, or go towards other exportables. And understand something that till such time you export uh, value added products to the world, you cannot turn around the economy, especially when economy has a large amount of poor people, unproductive people, and then a certain amount of very rich people. And the policies that Sri Lanka has taken are policies that are adopted by industrially developed countries. Sri Lanka doesn't have such an economy, but Sri Lanka was doing fine before COVID-19. It is the
I
world
mean, why?
inflation that
Why?
has.
I don't. I fail to understand, Dr. Saab. Why does a country like Sri Lanka delve down to such lows just because of COVID? Pakistan has survived. Other countries have survived. Why couldn't Sri Lanka survive? Why couldn't it anticipate what would be happening once COVID started?
Yeah, the word you used is very appropriate. Why could it not anticipate? When political governments and political leaders uh, think that politics is more important than economics, then this would happen. Understand something, that after the Second World War and the independence of countries like Sri Lanka and Pakistan and other such countries, the important position was not a welfare state, but was a state that catered for the very rich and catered for the foreigners. When the foreigner, underlying context is that if industrialization of value added goods and industrialization of exportables is what can take out Sri Lanka or countries like Pakistan. But now your question was very relevant, that why Sri Lanka could not. That is, you said that in your own introduction, mismanagement, simple mismanagement. We have to have short run policies and we have to have long run policies, and those policies means that we diversify, we build on things that I mean, no, I don't think any country apart from America, which is an industrial country, can survive just by taking loans. You have to return those loans. You have to have a certain amount of foreign exchange in that context. uh,
That is
Fisheries
true. Dr.
and
Saab, you talked about tourism. You know, just a few minutes back, you were talking about tourism, and one of the ways that Sri Lanka can rebound is through further extensifying its tourism industry. Now, apparently, as per the information I have received, Sri Lanka is going to hold road shows in 5 Indian cities to attract more visitors from, of course, India. And do you feel that countries like India, other countries will still go to Sri Lanka despite knowing that it is going through an economic crisis? Or will this be an aversion for them?
very frankly, I would go, because this is the time that foreigners should invest in Sri Lanka when prices are so low of property or of hotels. This is the time when hotels are empty. You can go. Technically it's a peaceful city. But the whole question is of commuting from one place to another. When there is no energy sources to commute, and the news is that now people are cooking on firewood. Very soon their jungles will finish, and that is going to be another problem in that. So energy in modern times has become very important, but at the same time, The second question can be asked that why Sri Lanka has not gone into solar power, because it
Of
has,
course,
or
clean energy could have easily gone into clean energy way back, but it hasn't. To date, it hasn't.
uh, the other issue that I see is not Sri Lanka. I see that this war of Ukraine is dividing the world into the industrially developed Europe and the
Okay.
countries like us who are not going to, but if they don't diversify their production, their exports, and their productivity of the labor force are going to lag behind. And Sri Lanka is a classic example. But your another question was that will IMF help? I think
Yes.
IMF will help. America is going to help, Russia is going to help, China is going to help, India is going to help. But that is a short run solution. Solution of long run sustainability comes from within. And that is where the policymakers of Sri Lanka has to take their decisions.
All right, Dr. Saab, you talked about petrol, and of course, petrol and gas are two commodities that are in lack in Sri Lanka as we speak. Now, the government has openly said, and I quote, as per reports, that no entity is willing to supply oil to Sri Lanka, even for cash, because its petroleum corporation owes a large debt. Because of the defaulting on the large debt, do you feel a lot of countries are apprehensive to help Sri Lanka out?
They would be, because of this war in Ukraine. I think Europe itself has a restraint of resources. Uh, uh, if you look at that, the Americans wanted Saudi Arabia to supply more oil, and the Saudi Arabians refused. The Sri Lanka has to now choose. Russia, Iran, these are the sources that might help Sri Lanka. But I think that the crux of the problem of Sri Lanka was an agreement of the port with China, from where the default started, and the whole thing backfired. I think Sri Lanka will have to go back to China rather than to India to solve its problems,
Dr. Qais,
and
also
have
speaking
agreements.
of China, Dr. Qais, I'd like to ask you a relevant question regarding Sri Lanka's relations with China. A lot of people are saying that in Sri Lanka and also in India, for of course way evident reasons, that Sri Lanka's relationship with China is not the same as it used to be, which has been denied by the Sri Lankan government. Is there also
But
a divide that is being made between Sri Lanka and China by the powers that be, so that Sri Lanka also, like other countries, sides with those that are anti-China?
actually, that is the crux of the problem. I think that it is the Indian who put pressure on Sri Lanka to cancel that contract of the port with China, and that started the or triggered the whole question. But Sri Lankan government will have to decide. Now, these are the days when you decide whether the America and Europe across the Indian and the Atlantic, or China, which is very near. The whole essence, I think, will come down to the CPEC, the Belt Road Initiative. That is the only time that China is going to reinvest in Sri Lanka. But
All
it
right.
will be a heavy price to pay for. But at the same time, I have to add that China is also an energy-starved country. So there is another group of nations which have oil on the other side of China and Pakistan. These are the Central Asian countries. But to get oil from them, you have to have a pipeline through China or through India, and and that is also a permission from Russia. So the geopolitics is going to play a role in all of how Sri Lanka is going to get out of the crisis.
Let's talk about some economic figures. I did mention some of them a few minutes back, but I'd like to rephrase them, and I'd like to have your point of view on the impact it's going to have on the Sri Lankan people's daily livelihoods. central bank hikes interest rates to 21-year high. They have raised the standing lending facility rate has been raised about to 15.5% or 100 basis points. Also, the inflation has come to 54.6% year on year in June. Food inflation has accelerated to 80.1%. On top of that, interest rates have been hiked by 850 basis points since the beginning of the year. Will people survive such an economic hardship? And if so, how long will they survive before aid actually comes to the country?
Look, Sri Lanka already had a violent protest. They burned down the house of the ex-prime minister, and the interior minister were beaten up and stripped. So the question of surviving is that the people are not surviving, but they're not going to lie down and die. As we already have talked about, they're cooking from wood. Their primary diet is fish, and they have a lot of sea around because it's an island. So somewhere the people will find a way of surviving. It is the economy which might not have a way of surviving in the modern terms. So what I was already saying is, but you mentioned interest rates. Now, the interest rates, we call it a medicine which is more painful than the ill. I believe that interest rates should be on a single digit, because interest rates, they, on one side, if they're high, they promote saving, but Sri Lanka doesn't have money to save. If interest rates are low, they promote investments. So I think they should bring down their interest rates. But what the central bank is doing is it is mitigating the exchange rates by keeping the interest rate high. That is not going to work. I believe that they should bring down the interest rate so that foreign investment and local investment should start coming in, whatever policies that they should also bring down their taxes on industry and on their whatever import substitutes or exportables they can manage. And that is the way that Sri Lanka can survive. But I think India and China are the key players. Sri Lanka needs to keep a good relation with both of them so that investments and joint ventures can happen with both these countries. That is a way of getting out of the country.
Last question, Dr. Qais. The Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, I will quote three statements. I'd like your point of view, a very short answer to that. Last month, he said the economy had collapsed. Very recently, he said that he can turn around Sri Lanka's economy by 2023, say 2024. Then he says his government was planning to bring an interim budget, most probably in August. Do you feel that the current leadership is competent enough to take the country out of the crisis? Short answer.
I don't think the current leadership is competent enough. They have this family has already damaged Sri Lankan economy. They are super rich while the people of Sri Lanka are very poor. So I don't believe that they are going to change their own lifestyles and their own behaviors. So I believe that they are not competent to bring Sri Lanka out of this crisis.
Thank you very much, Dr. Qais Ahmed, leading economist, talking to us about the crisis that has engulfed Sri Lanka. With every passing day, this crisis deepens, and all we can hope is that some kind of relief comes to the people. The United Nations agencies, including the World Food Programme, say that 5.7 million Sri Lankans need humanitarian assistance, with 4.9 million facing food insecurity. We can only hope for the best for our brothers in Sri Lanka in the days to come. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab, to have joined us.
It's a pleasure.
Let's come to our second segment, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns Boris Johnson, the United Kingdom. He is to step down as the Conservative Party leader after losing the support of his ministers and the MPs. These resignations started from Tuesday and went on to a high of 28 on Wednesday. More in the following report.
UK government is on the brink after the latest scandal has hit the Conservative Prime Minister's administration in recent months. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is facing his biggest crisis yet, after dozens of government officials, including 2 senior cabinet members, resigned over his handling of allegations of sexual misconduct by a member of the government. The shock resignations of 2 senior ministers triggered a string of departures from a number of other government members. The immediate cause of the crisis was the fallout from the resignation of Deputy Chief Whip Chris Pincher amid serious allegations. In the UK, the resignation of a Prime Minister doesn't automatically trigger a general election, and if Johnson were to step down, the Conservative Party would hold an internal election to choose a new leader, who would then become Prime Minister. Johnson would probably remain in post until his successor has been chosen, as did his predecessor Theresa May and David Cameron. Conservative Party rules dictate that if a leader wins a confidence vote, then they are immune from another challenge for 12 months. Johnson survived the confidence vote on June 6. Boris Johnson has weathered multiple political storms during his time as Prime Minister, but ongoing crisis seems immensely challenging for his position.
Now, as far as the United Kingdom is concerned, it has been embroiled in quite a lot of political tensions in the last few months. There was a vote of no confidence against Boris Johnson last month as well, which he survived. Nevertheless, he is to stand down as the Conservative Party leader after losing the support of his ministers and MPs. And there has been a whole list of resignations starting from Tuesday and Wednesday, and of course before that as well. Hamid Khan Al-Mushriki, who's a leading analyst, joins us online. Hamid Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. Hamid Saab, who understand the United Kingdom much better than people like myself do, what do you see? What led to Boris Johnson resigning today? Could he not govern the United Kingdom properly? Were there other issues within his party?
Thank you very much, Omar. I mean, you rightly said that there is an issue of governance as well, but I mean, let me tell you that this whole drama started from that Partygate scandal, where they have violated the rules of COVID-19, and they had some parties inside the 10 Downing Street. And then, since then, it was an ongoing, resistance against him that he should step down because he did something which he was not supposed to do. But he survived vote of no confidence just few weeks ago, and now he has a large list of resignations within last 24 hours, 50 or more than 50 resignations. I'll tell you, there are three main reasons. One, obviously, it's the morality, it's the based on morality, and secondly, most of the ministers are saying that because there's a high rate of inflation, and again the price hike issues, petrol prices have gone higher here as well, and the taxes. This Boris Johnson's government have raised different kind of taxes as well, which has caused MPs, they are not happy with it, and eventually they showed no confidence on their own prime minister. This is the beauty of British democracy, that I mean within the party there was a strong resistance, and eventually that resistance turned into a resignation from the ministers, and that led to the prime minister to resign from his own seat. This is the beauty of the democracy, and I think this is something with Pakistan and other countries like that, where the democracy is on initial stages. We need to learn from here that there is not a big deal that if you put a no confidence against your prime minister, or if you have not satisfied from the governance, there is members and ministers have full right to use their powers.
All right. Hamid, as we speak, Boris Johnson is also talking to the media live, and he has announced that he is going to resign. Now, we had received as reports that were that a Conservative leadership contest is going to take place this summer, and a new Prime Minister will be in place by October, and till that time, Boris Johnson is going to remain the Prime Minister. In the wake of all the resignations that you yourself talked about, and all the scandals that have rocked the party, will the party sustain itself? Will the party strengthen itself with a new Prime Minister?
Umar, that's a very difficult time for the party, because they could not perform well in local elections here as well, and then recent election, and then their Labour Party is getting popularity under the leadership of Keir Starmer. On the other hand, very interesting thing is that this is the first time in Tory party, in Conservative Party, there's a long list of the member of parliament who want to contest for the leadership, for the premiership of the country. It had never happened that such a long list is coming out, like Rishi Sunak, Sajid Javed, Liz Truss, and there's a long list going on. About 10 candidates have already announced that they want to contest for the premiership. It will be a very hard time for the party. And yes, because of the during summer, parliament goes off. It does not take place. So that's why they have to wait till September, October to be replaced with a new prime minister. And there are many questions being raised that whether Boris Johnson should stay for another 3 months as a caretaker prime minister, or there should be a temporary caretaker prime minister instead of Boris Johnson. But there is not a provision in the British constitution to put a temporary prime minister. This is like a constitutional thing which is not very much clear, that is there any possibility of replacing a caretaker prime minister for 90 days or less. So that's why, according to the current scenario, Boris Johnson will remain as the prime minister till autumn. And I will say that it will be a very hard time for the party, because the longer it drags, there will be more. I would say that I would say that differences in the party itself, and Tory party is going through a very rough time at the moment, although they are in
All right.
power for last 3 terms.
That is so true. But Hamid, do you feel all this spate of resignations, did it also start with the revelations about how Boris Johnson handled the misconduct allegations against former Deputy Chief Whip Chris Pincher? Was that one of the leading cases that led to all of this wave of resignations?
Of course, because I'll tell you, I mean, whenever in British Parliament or in British democracy, if you see, whenever anybody does a misconduct, and anybody who will try to defend it, whether it's the Prime Minister, whether it is a Secretary of Law or anybody, if they will try to defend anybody's misconduct, it will give a big, it gives a very bad impression in the public and in the Parliament as well. And it was going on debate, and that's why during the vote of no confidence, he narrowly escaped from no confidence. You have seen that in last 24 hours, it was havoc here, and he was trying to convince his own party member of parliament to vote for him, and it was it was very hardly he escaped from vote of no confidence. And one last thing I mean, definitely want to tell you that now at the moment, if they call for re-election, if they could not, do enough to have a leader, new elections will be very tough for the Tory party, because Labour has gone very strengthened within last 1.5 years. So it will be better for the Conservatives to decide a prime minister within their party rather than going for a new election.
All right, I'd like to understand something. You understand United Kingdom much better because you've lived there and you have family there as well. Why was Boris Johnson clinging to power despite knowing since some time that he was really, on the edge of losing his position? He could have easily resigned gracefully some time back. Why did he not do that?
I mean, that is something which is not traditionally happened in British politics. And that's why persons like me, you or so many people were very astonished that why Boris Johnson is not leaving, while this country has examples where they leave their ministerships and they left their
exactly from the least of things, the small scandals, and they resign immediately.
Yes, I mean, David Cameron left as prime minister just because he said that ethically, I don't think I should remain in power, because Brexit vote is not gone in favor of my ideology. There was no confidence against David Cameron. There was no campaign against David Cameron to leave being a prime minister office. But he just said that ethically, I don't think that I am fit for the job now, because my ideology was to remain in the Europe. And the people have voted against that with a difference of only 1.5% vote. Still, ethically, he stood and he stepped down. But the Boris Johnson's case is very rare, and it has set some bad examples in British politics as well. I should say that. I mean, this has put a bad example in the policy where he tried to drag his powers as much as he could. Even since last night, when Sajid Javed and Rishi Sunak gave the resignation, within 3 hours, he appointed new ministers for Treasury and others. And it was never happened before. Rather than giving the resignation, he was still trying to carry on as prime minister. And I'll tell you, he has become the fourth prime minister who has done the shortest term, only 2 years and 48 days.
All right, Hamid, also, does it put a dent as far as Tory party's politics are concerned, the way Boris Johnson has handled his position in the last month or so?
Yes, of course. It has not only put a dent on the popularity of the Tory party, it has also dented within its own, constitutional members, because they think that this is against the traditions of the British democracy. It is against the ethics of the democracy, and they believe that he should have stepped down long ago at the time of Partygate scandal. And then there was a report against him. Then there was vote of no confidence. Then there was 2-3 scandals where he defended his own minister's misconduct. So all these things have piled up against him, and it has given a big dent to the party. And we have seen in local elections in May that there was a lot of constituencies which were always safe havens for Tory party, and they lost those seats, and Labour won there, or Lib Dems won there.
All right. Hamid, now that, of course, Boris Johnson has resigned and he's going to remain in part till, of course, a new Prime Minister is elected after the summer vacations, as you yourself said, that the British Parliament does not work during the summers. Under the certain crises that are engulfing the world, whether it be Russia, Ukraine, whether it be the food crisis and all the others that are associated with it, does this resignation, does this political turmoil in the United Kingdom come at a very wrong time for the British people?
It is indeed very wrong time, because there are so many, events, as you are saying, are coming up, and Britain would not have a proper representation, because they will have a caretaker prime minister representing in G20, representing them in United Nations, representing them in European Union. And then there are three more, summits going on in next 2 months about the war in Ukraine and European Union's strategy about it. But the only thing is, I would say that they will try to follow up the policies which has been designed and set by their bureaucrats, and their technocrats will take care of it rather than politically. Now the things, until the new prime minister is not been coming into power, I believe that the technocrats sitting behind will tackle the more foreign policy than Boris Johnson himself.
Hamid, all the people that have resigned in the last week, especially on Tuesday and Wednesday, we have 28 people who resigned on Wednesday alone, and on Tuesday we had around 10 people who resigned. How will they be replaced in these months to come before a new Prime Minister comes?
What they're going to do is, they have already announced a new cabinet, complete full cabinet. And what they do is that those ministers will have a temporary power, but still they will not be able to use all their powers. They will be running as maintaining the daily routine of their businesses, and they will not take the critical decisions. Similarly, anywhere in the world, that when they're caretaker government, they have limitations in terms of their working and the future planning. But they have announced a complete cabinet today, just before 12:30, and now Boris Johnson is, as you say, that he's announcing his future plan.
He's announced it. He's done. He has announced it officially at 10 Downing Street.
Yeah.
All right,
exactly.
Hamid, with the backing of the Conservative Party to Boris Johnson, and now that he has, of course, officially resigned, what happens to the backing that Boris Johnson had? Where is all of that backing going to go? Because the statements that I saw by the Conservative MPs as far as their loyalty to Johnson, will it still remain once he is no longer Prime Minister?
No, it is. To be honest, it's a part of the politics everywhere else in the world. Once he's stepped down, then there will be a contest between the new contestants, and there will be a complete system, three-stage system to select the new prime minister, where every nominee person has to have backing of 8 MPs. To go into second round, he has to have the backing of more than 18 MPs. To go into third round, he has to have the backing of more than 36 MPs. And last 3 or 4 contestants will contest for the premiership.
All right. Thank you very much, Hamid Khan Al-Mashriqi, to have joined us, to have talked to us about, of course, the British politics and Boris Johnson resigning. We'll be back tomorrow with new news and stories that pertain to you and us. For us, it's goodbye for now, for the moment. Allah Hafiz.